What is the best way to get rid of weeds in a garden? Your first thought might be to pull them out by hand, and that's what I've been doing for as long as I've been gardening. But it's getting to a point where it's too much work and it's not worth it for the amount of work that I'm putting in. So, last week, if you guys watched the video, I did a lasagna bed method where I covered what was already growing there. So that was weeds, flowers, veggies, and I covered it with mulch. And what that basically does is it makes it much easier to start a new garden bed. You're not pulling everything out by hand. You're just covering what's already there and planting into it. Now, I only planted with seeds. One of the problems with that I've noticed so far in this bed is that seeds take longer to germinate than obviously a seedling, which is a small plant that's already sprouted. And so I've noticed a lot of weeds have popped up and started taking over the seedlings that I've put in the ground. So I need to find a better way of maintaining the weeds without pulling them out. So come along, let's have a look. So if we have a look at the garden bed, you can see there's lots of the seeds popping up. We got radish here, lettuce, silver beet. We've got more radish, lettuce, heaps of tomatoes popping up as well. More lettuce. If you come over here, this is the problem that I've encountered. All this nut grass has been popping up. It's actually gone through the mulch. It's a very aggressive weed. And I don't really want to weed that all by hand because that's very annoying. So my plan today is to get any plants that are growing around in other garden beds and plant them in any gaps where things haven't popped up as well. So for example, in this row here, this was meant to be leek. I've got some leeks popping up there, but there's not as many. So I'm probably going to put something else in here to fill in the gap so that there's no bare soil. And I want to show you guys a little visualization about why weeds aren't actually bad. So come with me, I'll show you. If we have a look at the ground here, you probably notice two major differences between the ground. We've got green, healthy grass and dead, shallow, dry soil over here. And it kind of cuts along here. And the reason this soil here looks like that is because this used to be a chicken run. So chickens would be in here all day. There was a fence that came along here. And the chickens ate everything and the ground didn't have time to recover so that plants could grow. So this area here looked the exact same as that a couple months ago. And I want to show you something about the soil if we have a quick look. So the reason the soil is like this on this plot is because there were no plants to hold the soil in place, no roots. So when the rain came down, it all washed away down the slope and it cuts off right there where there's all healthy green grass to hold it in place. And there's a quote that reminds me of, and it's, you can have you can have plants without soil, but you cannot have soil without plants. So the soil relies on plants to thrive. And you can see that. So all these rocks were actually under topsoil, and that's all washed away. So that all those rocks are actually over there as well, but you can't see them. So that really shows how much was washed away. And there's this whole thing in gardening where weeds are kind of painted out to be the bad guy, but weeds are actually they're like a band-aid on the soil. So when there is an open patch of soil, the first thing to stop that is weeds. And if we look over here, the soil is starting to recover. There's plants popping up everywhere, and their job is to hold the soil in place. So weeds aren't actually bad. They're just doing what nature's done best, and that's to hold the soil in place, stop erosion, and to feed the soil. These plants are also feeding all the microbes in the soil, and eventually it will look more like what it was like over there. And over there. But this is a very early stage of what happens when the soil erodes. So let's go back to the garden bed and have a look. So if we have a look at this nutgrass here, you probably see it in a different light now. The nutgrass is not the enemy. The nutgrass is just doing its job. It's protecting the soil from sunlight, it's shading it out, which stops it from drying out, and its roots are holding the soil in place so it doesn't wash away, and its roots are feeding the soil. So it's just doing its job. It's acting like a band-aid for the soil. But what us gardeners want to do is try and replace what nature does with vegetables so that the soil is protected. So what I'm going to try and do today is plant plants in the gaps so that there isn't room for the weeds to grow. The vegetables block out anything so that there isn't room, because any bare patch of soil is an opportunity for weeds to grow. So let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to plant in this garden bed is some basil, and I'm going to put it where I sowed the leek seeds, and they didn't do very well. There's some leeks over there and here, but this side didn't do so well at all. So I'm going to just fill that gap. Now I'm just going to walk along this garden bed and find any other gaps and fill it in with this basil. For this spot here where it is really bad, I am going to try and weed most of this, and the goal here is that I'm weeding early on so that these veggies become the weeds, if that kind of makes sense, and then I don't have to weed later on. So it's a bit of an investment, the way I think of it. So let's get into weeding. When I was going through the other garden beds, I found these marigold seedlings that I'm also going to plant in the garden bed just to fill some of those gaps. So let's find a spot for them. I also found a bunch of lettuce seedlings that I'll also find some gaps for. I'm pretty happy with where the garden is at the moment. Over the next few days, I'll just find any gaps that haven't sprouted and fill them in with any seedlings that I can find so that there's no real bare ground in the garden. And it's quite an easy way of gardening. Like, I only spent probably 15 minutes just filling in gaps, and I'm hoping that in the future that's going to save me a lot of time with weeding, because all of these will become the weeds in a sense. But I really appreciate you guys behind your screen watching this. It means a lot. If you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments. If you've got any video ideas for gardening that you'd like me to do, or just any videos, honestly, just ask. And please consider subscribing if you're not. Thanks for watching, guys.